I found myself shivering in the brisk night air, standing outside the house I had worked so hard to buy, now locked out by the very people who claimed to love me. Margaret's cold voice echoed from behind the door. "Grace, this house doesn't belong to you anymore. It's Trevor's home now." My heart ached, but my resolve grew stronger. I knew I had to fight back, not just for myself, but for the future of my unborn child. My name is Grace Thompson, and I am 34 years old. I work as an investment analyst, a career I've poured my heart into, building a life and independence that I'm proud of. It wasn't easy, but after years of hard work, I purchased my dream house in Austin, a stunning $7 million property that symbolized my success. It was my sanctuary until Trevor Harrison, the man I had once loved and trusted, turned my life upside down. Trevor, a 37-year-old software engineer, had swept me off my feet with his charm and intelligence. Our wedding day was beautiful and full of hope, but I never imagined the heartbreak that would follow. When Trevor's mother, Margaret, a 63-year-old retired college professor, began to interfere in our lives, everything changed. Margaret would visit unannounced, criticizing my choices and undermining my authority in my own home. "Grace, you really ought to redecorate," she'd say with a disdainful smile. "This house deserves a more refined touch." I tried to be patient, thinking I could handle her interference, but her criticisms became relentless. One evening, I approached Trevor to discuss boundaries. "Can we please talk about your mother?" I asked, hoping he would understand. "I feel suffocated in my own home." Trevor's response was dismissive. "Grace, she's just trying to help. Family comes first. You need to learn to get along with her." His words cut deep, and I realized then that he would never stand up for me. I felt isolated, a stranger in the very place I had worked so hard to call home. Things only got worse when Margaret decided to move in without asking me. One afternoon, I came home to find her unpacking her belongings. "I need to be here for my son," she announced as if it was the most natural thing in the world. My protests fell on deaf ears, and Trevor refused to intervene. My sanctuary was slipping away, and I felt trapped. Then, life threw me an unexpected curveball. I discovered I was pregnant. I thought the news would bring Trevor and me closer together, but Margaret's reaction was anything but joyful. "You'd better take care of yourself," she said coldly. "We can't afford any complications." Her indifference hurt, but Trevor's growing distance hurt even more. He barely acknowledged the pregnancy, and Margaret's control over our lives tightened. The breaking point came one evening after a long day at work. I returned home exhausted, only to find the door locked. I knocked, expecting Trevor to let me in, but Margaret's voice rang out instead. "Grace, unless you transfer ownership of this house to Trevor, you're not welcome here." My heart sank as I realized the depth of their betrayal. Trevor stood silently beside his mother, his expression blank. They threw my belongings onto the front lawn, and when I tried to reason with them, Trevor shoved me back. Tears streaming down my face, I picked up my things and left, feeling broken but determined. I knew I had to fight back. I reached out to my old friend Evelyn Carter, a brilliant attorney I had known since college. "Grace, we're going to make this right," Evelyn said firmly. "They can't take what you've worked so hard for." I moved in with my parents, grateful for their unwavering support. My father, a retired firefighter, and my mother, a nurturing homemaker, welcomed me with open arms. "You're not alone, Grace," my father reassured me. "We'll face this together." Despite their comfort, I felt a deep sense of loss. The house I had built my dreams around was now occupied by people who had betrayed me. But I couldn't let the pain consume me. I had to focus on taking back what was rightfully mine. Evelyn wasted no time. The very next morning, we met in her office to map out a strategy. "First, we need solid evidence," she explained, her voice steady but resolute. "We need to prove the emotional and psychological abuse, as well as their attempts to coerce you into giving up the house. Her confidence lifted my spirits, and I felt hope for the first time in weeks. I began documenting every instance of manipulation and abuse. I detailed how Margaret had taken over my home, undermined my authority, and even invaded my privacy. One afternoon, I came home early from work to find Margaret rifling through my financial documents. "What on earth are you doing?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. Margaret didn't even flinch. "I'm making sure everything is in order," she replied dismissively. "You're about to become a mother, Grace, and I need to know that you're prepared." The sheer audacity of her actions left me speechless. When I confronted Trevor, hoping he'd take my side, he merely shrugged. "She's just looking out for us," he said. I felt utterly betrayed. Evelyn helped me gather more evidence, including text messages and voicemails from Trevor and Margaret, as well as witness statements from friends who had seen firsthand how I had been mistreated. Each piece of evidence told a story of control and abuse, and I began to feel a fire of determination grow inside me. I wasn't just fighting for my home. I was fighting for my dignity and the well-being of my unborn child. Weeks passed, and the emotional toll was heavy, but I refused to give up. I kept a journal, documenting how the stress affected my pregnancy and my daily struggles. My parents remained by my side, reminding me of my strength and resilience. My father often said, "You're stronger than you think, Grace. You've already come so far." Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. As I stepped into the courthouse, my nerves were on edge. Evelyn walked beside me, her presence a calming force. Across the room, Trevor and Margaret sat confidently, their lawyer whispering in their ears. They looked so sure of themselves, but I knew that the truth was on my side. The judge, a composed woman in her early 50s, called the case to order. Evelyn stood up first, laying out our case with precision. "Your Honor," she began, "my client, Grace Thompson, has been the victim of coercion, emotional abuse, and financial manipulation. We have evidence showing that her husband and mother-in-law conspired to force her out of her own home, endangering her well-being and that of her unborn child." Trevor's lawyer was quick to respond, trying to paint me as an unreasonable wife who had exaggerated her claims. "Grace is simply unwilling to compromise," he argued. "Her accusations are baseless, and she's attempting to gain control over shared assets." But Evelyn was prepared. She presented our evidence meticulously, from text messages where Margaret threatened to call the police on me if I didn't sign over the house, to witness statements from friends who had observed their manipulative behavior. She even highlighted Margaret's invasion of my privacy and the emotional impact it had on my pregnancy. The judge listened carefully, her expression neutral but engaged. Then it was my turn to testify. My hands trembled slightly as I stood, but I took a deep breath, remembering everything I had been through. "I married Trevor because I loved him," I began, my voice steady. "But I never imagined that his mother would move into my home and try to take control of my life. When I tried to set boundaries, I was dismissed and ultimately locked out of my own house while pregnant. This is about more than money or property. It's about the emotional abuse I endured and the safe environment I want for my child." Trevor's face reddened as I spoke, and I could see Margaret shifting uncomfortably in her seat. The judge seemed to take in every word, her gaze unwavering. When Trevor was called to the stand, he attempted to portray himself as a misunderstood husband caught in the middle of a conflict. "I only wanted to mediate between my wife and my mother," he claimed, though his voice lacked conviction. "Grace overreacted, and we tried to work things out as a family." Margaret followed, but her condescending tone did her no favors. "I only did what I thought was best for my son and future grandchild," she insisted. "Grace is prone to exaggeration, and she created unnecessary drama." Evelyn was relentless in her cross-examination. "Mrs. Harrison," she said, her voice firm, Do you think it's appropriate to lock a pregnant woman out of her home and demand she give up her property? Margaret hesitated, her confidence faltering. She tried to defend herself, but Evelyn's pointed questions exposed the holes in her story. The judge called for a short recess. I stepped outside with Evelyn, feeling both anxious and hopeful. "You're doing great," she reassured me, giving my hand a squeeze. "We have a strong case, and the judge is listening." After the break, we returned to the courtroom for closing arguments. Evelyn stood confidently, her voice resonating through the room. "Your Honor," she began, "Grace Thompson built a life for herself through hard work and dedication, only to have it torn apart by the people she trusted most. The evidence is clear. Margaret Harrison and Trevor Harrison manipulated, abused, and coerced Grace in an attempt to take what is rightfully hers. This case isn't just about property. It's about the safety and well-being of a mother-to-be who deserves to live free from fear and control." Trevor's lawyer attempted a final defense, emphasizing that family disputes are often complex and that I had overreacted to Margaret's well-meaning intentions. But the judge's expression remained stern, and I could sense that she was unconvinced. The moment had arrived for the judge's decision. She leaned forward, her gaze serious and commanding. "Based on the evidence presented and the testimonies heard today," she said, her voice steady, "it is evident that Grace Thompson has suffered significant emotional and psychological abuse. The actions of Trevor Harrison and Margaret Harrison were not only manipulative, but also put Ms. Thompson and her unborn child at risk. Therefore, I am granting Ms. Thompson sole ownership of her home and full custody rights of her unborn child." The judge's next words sent a wave of relief through me. "Additionally, Mr. Trevor Harrison and Mrs. Margaret Harrison will be required to pay financial penalties. Mr. Harrison is ordered to attend mandatory counseling sessions, and a restraining order will be issued against both defendants to ensure Ms. Thompson's safety." Trevor and Margaret sat in stunned silence. Margaret's previously smug expression had vanished, replaced by shock and disbelief. Trevor looked pale, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Meanwhile, I felt a rush of emotions: relief, triumph, and a sense of justice. I had won. Evelyn turned to me, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it, Grace," she whispered. "You stood up for yourself, and now you can finally move forward." Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were tears of joy. I had fought for myself and my child, and had emerged victorious. As I left the courtroom, my parents were waiting for me outside. My mother wrapped me in a warm hug, and my father, his eyes glistening, said, "We always knew you had it in you. You're stronger than you realize." In the days that followed, I began the process of rebuilding my life. I moved back into my house, reclaiming it as my sanctuary. With the support of my parents and friends, I transformed the space into a safe, nurturing environment for my baby. The walls that had once echoed with Margaret's criticism were now painted in calming colors, filled with warmth and love. Trevor and Margaret, meanwhile, faced the consequences of their actions. The financial penalties were significant, and Trevor's reputation suffered as news of the court case spread. Margaret's condescending demeanor had cost her respect within the community, and their influence over me had finally been broken. One afternoon, Evelyn visited me at home. We sat in the living room, now a space of peace and comfort, sipping tea as we talked about the future. "You've come so far, Grace," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "You've shown incredible strength." I placed a hand on my growing belly, feeling my baby move gently inside. "I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever realized," I replied, "and I want my child to grow up in a home filled with love and security." Evelyn's eyes sparkled with a playful glint. "So what's next? Any big plans for the future?" I smiled, thinking of the possibilities. "I want to keep growing in my career, maybe even start my own real estate consulting firm one day. But for now, I'm focused on being the best mother I can be." As the weeks went on, I prepared for the arrival of my child with a sense of excitement and hope. My parents were thrilled to become grandparents, and their love surrounded me like a protective shield. I no longer felt like a victim. I was a survivor, ready to embrace the future with strength and confidence. One evening, I sat in the nursery, gently rocking in the chair I had bought for late-night feedings. The room was bathed in soft, golden light, and I whispered to my unborn child, "You are loved, and you will always have a strong, brave mother who will protect you no matter what." I had come full circle, from feeling powerless and broken to standing tall and determined. The journey had been painful and full of heartbreak, but it had also transformed me into a woman who knew her worth. I was ready for whatever came next, confident that I had the strength to face any challenge. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more captivating tales. Your support means the world.